Is this the OLED TV most people should buy? I've arrived at a definitive answer, but for some of you, the news could be a tough pill to swallow. I'm Caleb, and today we're looking at why the Samsung S90H OLED TV might be the perfect choice for some of you, and the 2 deal breakers that might change some minds. So the S90H sits just under the flagship S95H OLED TV. That's the TV that just won the King of TV award at an annual TV shootout. The S90H is similar to LG C6 and C6H in that they're a little bit different depending on the size you get, and they sit just under the flagship model. Now, when you upgrade to those flagship models, you get some frills and a slight boost in picture quality, but the boost in price that comes with those upgrades is not worth it for most folks. That's why I've recommended Samsung's S90 series for several years now. It gives that premium experience at a price that's more attainable for a lot of you. But is that still the case? Well, if you haven't bought a TV in a few years, the S90H's picture quality is going to blow you away. No question about it. But as I said, there are a couple of caveats to this TV. And just because the picture quality is amazing doesn't necessarily make this the right choice for everybody. Not everyone should even get an OLED TV, even though they consistently win awards. In this review, we'll talk about what it's like to live with the S90H, what its picture quality is like, and how it compares to the competition, what other models you should be looking at. We'll also talk about whether OLED is right for you, whether you get what you pay for, and of course, those 2 big problems some folks will have with this TV, and whether or not you should even be worried about them. So once you get the TV unboxed, you'll either wall mount it or set it up on its stand. There are 2 legs that come with the TV, and they're substantial enough, they keep the TV stable, but the plastic cover that you put over these feet for that pedestal style look, it feels a little cheap. It looks good though, so I'm not gonna dock it points. Once you have the TV in place, and before you get to setting up the TV, you'll need to remove some protective film. And that's where you're going to notice there's something different about the screen itself. Part of that tough pill I mentioned earlier. But we'll get into the whole glossy versus matte debate in a moment. The S90H's design is understated. A lot of folks will like that it doesn't come with that big frame that you get with the S95H. It's super thin, as OLED TVs tend to be, but it has a slightly thicker bezel up top that I wasn't expecting. The TV has 4 HDMI 2.1 inputs and 1 eARC port. The eARC port makes connecting a soundbar or receiver super easy. And HDMI 2.1 ports mean you have plenty of bandwidth for the latest gaming consoles and gaming PCs, as well as any other box or disc player that you may want to connect. Gamers also get variable refresh rate support up to 165 Hz, along with FreeSync Premium Pro and NVIDIA G-Sync through those HDMI 2.1 ports. Now, when you first turn the TV on, you'll be walked through a setup wizard. It seems super easy, but then you'll need to be prepared to set up a Samsung account. If you don't, you won't be able to use any of the streaming apps that are built into the TV. That might be okay with you if you're going to be connecting something like an Apple TV or Roku instead, but if you planned on using built-in apps like Netflix and Disney Plus, etc., you'll have to use a Samsung account. It's just like you have to have a Google account on Google TV or a Roku account on Roku TVs. Once you're through all of the setup stuff, you're greeted by Samsung's One UI powered by Tizen. The Tizen operating system has been around for a long time, and it's seen plenty of changes, mostly for the better. The home screen and navigation through the TV is much less annoying than it used to be, but there are still a lot of ads, and Samsung loves to autoplay a show from its Samsung TV Plus app, that's free TV, with the sound on, and I do not love that. You know what though? I'd still put this interface ahead of LG's WebOS, though I still prefer Apple TV, Google TV, and Roku. With that said, the TV is loaded with connected device features. It can tie in with any Samsung SmartThings device. That's Samsung refrigerators, robot vacuums, washers, dryers, you name it, you can integrate it here if that's your thing. Samsung also has really actually awesome audio connectivity. You can connect any number of Samsung soundbars or smart speakers wirelessly, and the TV will play a role in the sound using Samsung's Q Symphony sound feature. I mean, Samsung makes a really strong case for staying with its brand and its ecosystem, but you don't have to. The remote is rechargeable either via USB-C or solar panels on the back, which I still think is super cool. There aren't a lot of buttons here. Most of what you need is going to be on the screen. So if you're upgrading from an older TV, this minimalist button thing might take some getting used to. Gamers also get a full suite of cloud-based gaming options, no console required, with support for a wide array of controllers. And there's a gaming dashboard that gives you tons of control over the picture. Overall, I get along with Samsung TVs well enough, and I think most of you out there will be good with it too, especially when it comes with this TV's picture quality. So let's talk about that. Bottom line, this TV perfectly treads the line between jaw-dropping picture and not as jaw-dropping price. The step-up S95H model smacks you in the face with a shocking bill after its delicious meal of a performance. But the S90H will have you feeling like, you know, that's a bit pricey, but it sure is worth it. What makes the picture so good is the OLED panel. Now, there are several OLED panel types, and this one gets nice and bright with perfect black levels. It isn't the brightest or the most colorful, but it's still far and away better than any TV from, say, 3 or 4 years ago. Also, a lot of folks prefer OLED TVs to LCD TVs. It's the contrast, the perfect black levels, that make this TV's picture pop. It's the kind of TV that will have you and your guests gawking anytime you watch it. It's great for sports, movies, TV, you name it. It can handle any kind of content, even older shows in lower resolution, thanks to its excellent upscaling. But maybe most importantly is that it performs well in a sunny or brightly lit room, even if that light is coming from behind you and directly hitting the screen. As you can plainly see, it's not bothered at all by our studio lights, and you can't see my reflection in it very well, if at all. Now, before we see if the S90H is worth it for your specific living room, I want to thank the folks who helped me keep the lights on here at the studio so I can do these deep dives. Malwarebytes. Look, if you're spending a couple $1,000s on a smart TV that's connected to your home network, you need to be thinking about digital privacy. Malwarebytes is my go-to because they handle everything from credit monitoring to a built-in VPN. It's peace of mind for your whole digital life. You can get a discount and support the channel by clicking the link in the description. Huge thanks to Malwarebytes for supporting this channel and today's Deez Nits segment coming up later. Now back to the S90H. What exactly makes this TV junior to the flagship S95H that just stole the King of TV show? Well, frankly, most of you aren't going to care, nor should you care. And I'm going to tell you why. So the two caveats I've been alluding to are the so-called matte screen and the fact that the panel type changes depending on the size of the TV you buy. In the 65-inch size, which is what I have here, the TV comes with a WOLED panel, like last year's LG C5. However, it is believed that the 77-inch and likely 83-inch S90H use a tandem OLED panel, which is known to have higher brightness and supposedly greater longevity. This would not be the same tandem OLED Gen 2 panel found in LG's most premium G series TVs this year. Now, there were some who complained about text rendering on the first gen tandem OLED panels like those found in the 77-inch and 83-inch S90H, something about the clarity not being as sharp. But the users most likely to notice that would be gamers or PC users scooched up real close to a 42 or 48-inch TV used as a monitor. The frustrating part is that everything I just told you could change at a moment's notice because Samsung buys its OLED panels from LG Display and may not always be able to just demand which panel they get. And it'll be hard to know what you got without literally pixel peeping with a phone camera or microscope because Samsung doesn't talk about which OLED TVs get which types of panels. Another example is that 77-inch version of that award-winning S95H OLED doesn't get the more advanced QD OLED panel that the 65-inch model gets. Make that make sense. Samsung won't disclose which TVs get which panel. You're paying for a premium experience, but Samsung is playing hide the ingredients with the hardware. For a brand that wins awards for innovation, that's a tough one to swallow. Fortunately, I don't think most of you are going to care, nor would you notice a difference unless you had two different TVs side by side. But then there's the so-called matte screen, which for most folks just makes the TV easier to watch during the day. But there are some that say it takes away from the depth of the picture at night, that the lack of gloss that makes it a black mirror takes away from some of the luster of HDR gleam. So why do I think most of you won't and shouldn't care? Well, because most of you, like the folks that came through and looked at this TV with me, won't notice any lack of luster. Plus, I think the anti-glare, anti-reflection treatment is a net benefit to anyone who watches TV in anything other than a dark room all the time. Now, this next one I kept secret so far because I didn't want it to be a distraction or a point of confusion. I'm talking about the Dolby Vision dilemma, or rather Samsung TV's lack of Dolby Vision on board. Yes, you should be aware that Dolby Vision is an extremely popular HDR feature that is supported by every major TV manufacturer except Samsung. I can't think of any reason Samsung doesn't capitulate, save that it increases their margins, i.e. they make more money, that it allows them to snub Dolby and its licensing fees, or that they want to push their own version, HDR10 Plus Advanced. And it's probably a mix of all three, honestly. In the end, Dolby Vision does have something special to offer, but many content creators aren't taking real advantage of it. So practically speaking, it's become a different variant of chocolate ice cream. Sometimes it's dark chocolate, sometimes it's milk chocolate, sometimes it's Dutch, and sometimes it's Swiss chocolate. Subtle variants, some better than others, but in the end, the pull is that chocolate ice cream is delicious. And that's what everyone really wants. Only in picture quality, delicious picture. Dolby Vision can be a more advanced flavor, but usually it's just a different flavor. And it isn't always better either. HDR10 Plus is also delicious, and so is HDR10 Plus Advanced. HDR in general is awesome. So Samsung not having Dolby Vision may be silly and or stupid, but practically speaking, I wouldn't call it a net loss. And since we've already gotten a little nerdy, let's lean in with a section I like to call Deez Nits. If you're not into charts and measurement data, skip ahead. My final take and a hilarious outtake is at the end of this video, and you just don't want to miss it. Click ahead on the timeline or choose the last chapter in the description if you want to skip this part. All right, nitpickers, so first off, because I was so set on making sure I was testing stock filmmaker mode in SDR and HDR on this TV, I completely forgot to go back in and turn off the room sensor that automatically adjusts brightness, tone mapping, and color temperature. That's embarrassing, and I could have left that out of this video, but the reason I mention it is because SDR filmmaker mode tested horribly in a dark room with that sensor engaged. HDR fared a little bit better, but if ever there was a case for turning off the ambient light sensor, this is it. You will not like the picture in a dim room on filmmaker mode with that sensor on. The whites were so green, virtually no blue in the white balance when I measured it. It was literally off the chart, like not on the chart. I thought there was a major problem with the TV. Thankfully, Classy Tech Calibrations reminded me that you have to turn off the sensor for each input and mentioned you can't defeat it in movie mode, which is even weirder because movie mode actually measured really well. Anyway, if you get this TV and want the most accurate picture, filmmaker mode is still the way to go. Just disable that ambient light sensor. Don't forget to do it for each input and the streaming apps. In SDR, the S90H came in under a delta E of 3 in the 2-point white balance measurement, and though the midtones came up a little bit, which is typical, overall it did very well in Calman's grayscale test too, and the gamma held on very respectably. Stock peak white came in at 255 nits, and you can jack that way up if you want to. And the S90H did very well with the color checker, saturation sweeps, and luminance sweeps, though red seemed to be a bit of a problem. I corrected the white balance and that red error came down a little bit. In HDR, peak brightness hit 1600 nits a few times during testing. What you see here is a little bit under 1600 nits, and it did that all the way up to a 10% window. 75% window came in at 400 nits, and the full screen white was 300 nits. Very bright in a dimmed down room, less so with the shades open, so I'd probably bump the peak brightness setting in filmmaker mode or movie mode up to high. Now, for those getting the 77 or 83-inch model of the S90H, you'll likely get the tandem OLED panel, and while I can't say for sure that they will match the LG C6H, I will say the C6H came in with peak brightness numbers around 2100 nits, right up to 10%, but full screen brightness and a 75% window were exactly the same as the C6H. In other words, I don't know that there's going to be a practical brightness difference except in the brightest highlights of HDR. Now, I noticed more color errors in HDR than in SDR, but not because of luminance limitations, oddly enough. It looks like the chroma was a little off, but the hue was spot on and only low luminance colors in the dimmest areas were off. And that's true of almost every TV we test. Color gamut was what I expected from a WOLED, 99% of DCI-P3 and about 76% of Rec 2020. Color volume came in respectably, though not as strong as some of these mini RGB LCD TVs showing notable boosts in color volume. I did not run the gamut rings test because A, it is an excruciating and time-consuming exercise, and B, we know that because OLED doesn't get nearly as bright as LCD flagships, and judging from the color volume test, that it would come up a little short in high luminance color compared to the competition. Overall, the S90H gives an excellent out-of-box experience. I'd just recommend some light de-judder and de-blur to take the edge off some of the stutter that you'll catch both in slow panning shots and faster motion objects like you see here with the woman on the swing. This is due to the near instant response time of OLED pixels. So the takeaway for me is that the S90H is the mid-tier OLED that I'll be recommending this year, if only because I enjoy using it more than the LG C6. I think it offers the right blend of price and premium performance. I do not think an OLED TV is right for someone who leaves their TV on all day, especially on channels with a logo on the screen, as this is one of the rare cases in which burn-in can still show up on the short term. Otherwise, I wouldn't worry about burn-in. Another reason I'm compelled to recommend this OLED TV so highly is the anti-glare and anti-reflection properties. To finally get this kind of screen at the mid-tier OLED level is definitely cause for celebration. It only serves to add value to the TV. Now, enthusiasts may balk at that screen type, and I get it, but the black levels are solid, and it's highly effective too. I don't love that there's questions around what type of panel you'd get, especially since the new pixel structure seems to cause some off-angle color issues. That causes a narrow cone of optimal performance. I don't know if one of those panels is going to sneak in. I did enjoy the C6H a great deal, so I think the 77 and 83-inch versions of this TV could suit most folks very well too. Now, a lack of Dolby Vision may be a deal breaker for some, but the more I watch HDR10 and HDR10 Plus content, the less concerned I am about missing out on Dolby Vision performance. In fact, sometimes the HDR10 Plus versions look better to many folks. I do wish, though, that there was Dolby Vision for gaming. That alone might steer gamers toward LG for gaming, though the TV shows impressively low input lag numbers, like 9.5 milliseconds at 60 Hz. That drops down to about 5 milliseconds at 120 Hz or 165 Hz. All of that with the solid motion performance you'd expect from an OLED. No visible screen tearing either. It's a great gaming TV if you can live without Dolby Vision. Easy 9 out of 10 for performance to price ratio. And it's gonna be my top OLED recommendation in this price class. Well done, Samsung. Thanks as always for watching, everyone. You know the drill. Just follow the little graphic down below and click that thumbs up button if you would. We'd love to see you as a subscriber as well. Let me know what you think down in the comments, please. I'll be there to chat with you as this review comes out. I'll see you again soon, and until then, take care of yourself. Red Bull, you've been supplanted by Kirkland brand energy drinks.